Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kersner.
Hello and welcome to episode 80 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this precious and beautiful present moment. The title and topic for today's podcast is Presence Requires Discipline. And this is a topic that I chose because I think about what it takes to be present. I'm asked that often. I talk often about the many things that we can do and how we can do them to be more present, to achieve presence. But remember, achieving presence doesn't mean that you're just there and it's done. It's about maintaining presence or understanding when we're present and when we're not. But really what is most important is the discipline that we have to maintain, to build, to establish presence. Discipline is a tough thing, and it's a tough word for most of us because of how we've been conditioned, how we've been disciplined, if you think about that. A lot of us grew up being disciplined, being constrained, being told what to do. And it leads some of us to not wanting to be told what to do ever again. And then we lead lives that lack discipline, or we think we're disciplined in certain areas and lack discipline in other areas. I think the goal for me and for this podcast is to help reframe the word discipline, to take away the negative connotation, the negative motivation that happened when we were disciplined, and use it more in a neutral fashion, possibly positive, so that we can become more disciplined. We could show more discipline so that we could be present. In the beginning of this podcast series, I talked about presence tools and a mindfulness practice. A mindfulness practice is something that is subjective, but one of the important facets of this practice is that it's done daily for quite a while, and that requires discipline, because a lot of us are used to waking up in the morning, just jumping out of bed and grinding the day out. And to establish a presence practice means that we might have to wake up earlier. We might have to wake up 10 minutes earlier, 30 minutes earlier, whatever it is that you require for your presence practice. But we're going to have to set time aside. We're going to have to reallocate some of our time, some of our energy, so that we can establish the anchor point, so that we can experience presence first thing in the morning. That's the discipline. The discipline is showing a commitment to oneself, to being able to live a life that is more present. And when we're present, everything becomes available to us. No longer do we have to exist in the past or the future. No longer are we dominated by that loud voice in our heads, by our ego. But it's our ego that wants us to be undisciplined, to make us think that we could do whatever we want whenever we want. Your right as an adult is to make choices. And yes, those choices are somewhat constrained throughout reality, throughout the third dimension, throughout society. I mean, you can't do anything that you want, but you do have a variety of choices to make. And those are yours to make in your subjective life and with your subjective perspectives. But it's important to zoom out, to take some time to look at the choices that you've made and the choices that you're making. And when we look at the choices that you've made, first of all, let's be objective. Let's not be judgmental. But let's look and think about if they've had the required discipline to achieve whatever it is that you intended to achieve, or were you just doing whatever you wanted to do or felt like you wanted to do or thought you wanted to do in that present moment? And what was motivating that? Was it your ego? Was it your emotions? This is important to pontificate on, to think about, to spend time with, is, do I have discipline? Do I need discipline? Do I need to implement discipline? What does discipline look like? Why do I feel like I don't need discipline? And also to reflect back to when you were disciplined and how that's overlaid on the word itself and how you live your life and what effect that is having on your presence, on your present moment. Because to achieve presence requires discipline. And being present is a lovely state of being, but it takes effort. It takes a commitment. It takes a presence practice. It takes a mindfulness practice. It takes presence tools. And more importantly, it takes having awareness at all times of what's going on within you. Because whatever's going on within you is going to be reflected in your outer reality, in your outer world. And without discipline, you become like a rudderless ship in the sea, at the mercy of the waves. And the waves are your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings, all driven by your ego. So let us reframe the word discipline. Let's remove the negative motivator when we were disciplined. Let's reframe the word so it feels more neutral. Discipline. I want discipline. Why do I want discipline? So that my life will be more peaceful, more neutral, more present. So that way, when I'm disciplining myself or implementing discipline, it's neutral. It has purpose. It has intention. I've softened it up. No longer will I allow my ego to believe that having discipline is negative. I'm making peace with the times where I was disciplined. And I understand that to be more present requires that kind of commitment to myself, to my life, to my awakening into the present moment. And I am committed to doing that. And part of that commitment is having the discipline to wake up early, to go through my presence practice, to use my presence tools, to have awareness, observation, to be the observer, not to be judgmental on the things that I have done so that I could see them for what they are and learn from them and not repeat them. That requires discipline, but discipline with neutrality, not discipline as a negative motivator. And this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to use a tool like discipline and to understand that presence does require discipline, and that's okay. It's not bad, and it's not going to be hard. It's not going to be tough. It's not going to take forever. That's what your ego wants you to think. That's why you have lacked discipline, because it's been purported to be something bigger than what it is. It is a switch to be flipped. It's a state of being more disciplined, having a life that is disciplined. That's okay. It's going to allow you to see things for what they are. It's going to allow for more peace and prosperity. It's going to allow you to have more objectivity. That's what being disciplined will allow for. But if you maintain a negative stance on this word, and I understand why, trust me, I understand why being disciplined can feel very negative. But I also understand what that's done to me and to my ability to be present, and why I've had to take such great effort to reframe a word like discipline so that it's more neutral. And so I understand what it'll provide for, which is ultimately more presence. We don't need to dig any deeper than that, because we are all living in the third dimension. We're all part of society, and discipline has been a negative motivator that has been woven through societal programming, conditioning. It's a control mechanism, and it's one that does not usually feel good. So I wanted to share my present seconds in an effort to help shift our perception from negative to neutral on a behavior, on an action like discipline, so that we can see that it allows for the commitment necessary so we can maintain and achieve a state of presence and awareness and ultimately peace. So take some time today or whenever you'd like and think about the word discipline. Take some time to think about your reality and the things that have happened in relation to having discipline or not. Do not be judgmental. Don't let your ego jump in there, make you feel bad. Because the opportunity is to implement discipline in this present moment. It's impossible to go into the past and change anything about that, but your ego will make you ruminate about that, make you believe things that aren't so. And we've talked about that loud voice in your head. And as you start to look at a word like discipline, you better believe your ego is going to start chiming in. That's fine. But part of the discipline is to be the observer, to commit to being the observer of that voice in your head, to be the observer, to see things with clarity, to be softer to oneself, to not use negative motivators. And we're now changing discipline away from a negative motivator to a neutral behavior where it allows for a more positive experience. And isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that what we all want? Is just to soften the edges a little bit of this reality of our lives. And I know that's not easy per se, but looking at discipline, having more discipline will make things easier. And that is valuable. So I hope that this podcast was helpful. Discipline is certainly a topic that is worth sitting with, is worth analyzing, is worth understanding, and definitely worth reframing. And that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to take an opportunity to help you reframe and then understand the importance of having discipline, and that discipline will allow for presence. So I want to thank all of you for sharing your present seconds with me, and I wish you nothing but peace.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.